Welcome friends to another r/malicious compliance video. Our first story of the day is by Magnus40. I must check for any place a person can hide during a fire drill? Okay, let's see how that works out for you. Background: I worked in a building where I was a fire marshal. No extra money and a small amount of extra work, but someone has to do it. I was also a first aider, and somehow got landed with arranging the Christmas night out, so maybe the building manager saw me as an easy mark. The only advantage that I had was during the drill or a real event, I had absolute power. Anyone not following an evacuation order swiftly was called up for disciplinary action. We had random drills, about 12 per year. My job was to ensure that the building was clear, basically pop my head in each office space, toilets, kitchens, etc., and see that nobody was there, and then take a register outside. 5 minutes tops. Anyone booked into the building that was not registered by me was in trouble. The drills were sprung on me, as well as the building manager had the fire alarm keys, and it made it a more realistic test. The building manager was a tick. He wielded his small amount of power as much as he could and loved to report people for tiny infractions. During one drill, he hid in a cupboard, then called me into his office for failing to ensure that the building was clear. Apparently, some people may run and hide from a fire instead of leaving the building. I got a wagging finger and told to do better next time or I would lose the marshal role. My job was pretty safe since nobody actually wanted to take over, and after hearing the story of me getting into trouble, they absolutely did not want the job. The building manager changed the fire marshal process instruction to include checking hiding places. This is a site instruction. He had no power to do so, I later found out. Malicious compliance begins. The alarm went off, the first after my failure to check cupboards. Everyone left, crossed the road, and stood in the assembly point in, and this is very important, the rain and wind. I searched the top floor very carefully, opening up large cupboards, opening up boxes large enough to hide a person, looking under each desk in case someone was hiding. First floor, ditto. UK, so our first floor is the US second, and our ground is the US first. By now, people were cold and wet and unhappy, but building manager refused to let them enter. He knew that it was coming. He was well prepared for the weather. Most people had light clothing on as the car park stood next to the building. They don't bother with coats in the 20-foot trip from car to building. Ground floor, checked everywhere, and finally the basement, where the boiler lives and is a general dumping ground for old files and junk. That took ages, but I was thorough. Very thorough and slow. Thorough slow, not taking the piss slow. I left the building, took the register, and a mass of sodden people headed back into the building. I was massively unpopular until I showed them the PI that said I had to check all spaces that someone could hide. They knew what happened at the last test and directed all the anger at building manager. It was the equivalent of the angry villagers turning up at Castle Frankenstein with torches and pitchforks. People were furious at him some. One of the office staff was a union rep and reported him to the site safety officer, who went ballistic at him, telling me to remain in a potentially burning building longer than necessary, and a number of people went home to get dry clothes and the company had to give them special leave to do so, or else the union would have to get involved. He got crap from all sides: workers, union, management, and site safety officer. Most of the time, nothing gets done when it's just you complaining. But it really gets done when the correct people are inconvenienced. If you were in OP's shoes and this building manager called you out because he climbed into a cupboard and said you have to check every place somebody could be hiding, would you willingly make all those people stand out there in the wind and rain while you methodically searched every nook and cranny to make sure there's no one hiding there while this building's burning down? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by Roseblade Phantom. Boss got mad at me for wasting time organizing. How I realized my job wastes more money than I make. Story: spent a ridiculous amount of time looking for pens, important keys, and work essentials yesterday. In fact, that's every day for the last year. Spent the last 15 minutes of work yesterday organizing our two main only drawers that were cramped with things from over the year, and making sure daily essentials were easily accessible. Came into work today, typical day, things got super slow, so I continued my organizing efforts. Found hundreds of dollars in equipment that had been forgotten over the years, but mostly trash I discarded. Took about an hour in between pausing to take care of immediate things. I was almost finished when boss comes over and starts haphazardly organizing things, basically complaining I'm being too thorough and that we weren't going to be using this precious time to organize. I asked if everything was okay and got snapped at as boss swept what was left to organize back into the drawer. I then spent the next 20 minutes doing nothing, expecting the theatrics to be followed by what was supposedly so much more important. 20 minutes. It would have taken me less than 10 to finish organizing while not having any further instruction. I open the drawer, messy once more, and see boss's phone. I close the drawer. I mean, this is the level of organization we aspire for, right? Who am I to waste time questioning this? Boss eventually gives me a sheet to check inventories with. I haven't been trained on this particular task, I make that clear, but I'm barked at about how simple it is. The sheet doesn't make any sense, so eventually boss comes over and starts trying to storm through it. Oh, wrong sheet? Man, if only we were organized. Eventually get to the end of it, and we're missing hundreds of dollars in inventory. Boss had been helping, so I clearly state that I had approached my task carefully, one by one, and in order with double checks, and I knew I hadn't messed up. Eventually, boss asks if I've seen their phone. I say yes. Where? You organized it. Don't you remember? Boss barks at me with the same question. I say they swept it into the drawer with everything else. Boss says they don't remember that, and I say nothing as boss returns to their office. Why didn't I say anything? It was all on camera anyway, in the perfect spot actually. I'm quitting this job shortly, so I didn't feel the need to make it a big deal. Epilogue, a former coworker, a great one, visited and confirmed that things in that drawer were years old. We have a pretty high turnover rate, and it's because employees either don't care or actually do care and are penalized for it, or both. We've lost 2 senior employees in a month, and I'm just sitting here with a secret deadline until I'm out too. Though after today, why not at least look for another job? I can already hear myself. Why did I leave my last job? We didn't share the same values on organization. I felt a lot of man-hours were being wasted due to an unorganized environment. I've shot up the totem pole a lot because of turnover, and have accepted increased responsibilities. By my calculations, in just a month we've wasted somewhere around $3,000 due to lack of organization, and that's only from the responsibilities I've inherited. If things are proportional in each department, that number multiplies easily. This means organizational mishaps cost my job more than I even make. P.S. Would it be unethical to ask for a raise knowing full darn well no amount they pay me is making me stay more than a few more months? I mean, you're already on your way out, and you're handling increased responsibilities. I would say personally it doesn't hurt to ask for a raise. If you get told no, then maybe that's just another reason as to why you're leaving. This next story is by Lunatunes291. You think it's disgusting when I dispose of tampons appropriately in the garbage can? Okay. Obligatory, this happened to me around 8 years back. It was the summer before my senior year in high school, and my best friend at the time invited me to come stay with her and her dad's family in Florida for 2 weeks. Much to my chagrin, on a beach vacation no less, I got my period. I had brought supplies with me just in case, and disposed of them wrapped up in toilet paper in the lidded garbage can in the shared bathroom we were using, as one does. On the 3rd day of the trip, her dad approached me to say that my friend's stepbrother, who lived with them, had seen my period products in the bathroom garbage can. Like, were you digging around in there, you weirdo? And was disgusted by it. He asked me to not throw them out there so his son wouldn't have to see that. Again, a lot harder to see than to avoid in my opinion, but I digress. I asked him where he suggested I dispose of my disgusting products then to avoid upsetting his son. I thought it was kind of a ridiculous request since this is a natural body process I can't control, but I wanted to do what I could since I was just a guest there. But this man goes, "Just hold it in until we go out to dinner or something and throw it out in a public restroom." Sir, you have a daughter. How can you not know that's not how things work? When I asked him what I should do if that wasn't an option, he said, "Just flush it then, so he doesn't have to see it." Cue malicious compliance. Yes, sir. Instead of wrapping up my used tampon in some toilet paper and tucking it into the trash can that has a god-darn lid, I will flush it down the toilet instead. The first one went down just fine. The second time it went down with a gurgle, but the third one made the toilet back up and overflow. I'll always remember the sight of my friend's dad pumping that toilet only for a partially dissolved bloody tampon to float to the surface of the bowl. I went back to putting them in the trash, and he didn't say another word about it. Like OP said, not only is this a natural body function that they can't control, they wrapped it up in toilet paper and put it in a lidded trash can. You literally can't see it unless you were digging through the trash. I feel like it was the dad that didn't want to see it and was blaming it on the son, but it was really their request the whole time. That's the kind of vibe I'm getting from it. And our final story of the day is by Mr. Avalanche 1981. Might make sure you know what I'm working on before letting me go. I was working for a logistics company several years ago. They went through a merger and wound up shutting our office down. They presented it to us like they were doing us a favor and expected me to pick up and move states to keep working with them. That obviously wasn't in the cards, so what happened next was a bit of fun. When we got the email talking about the merger, I had my reservations. When we got a second email indicating that the company president, VP, head of sales, and an HR supervisor were all coming down to meet our 8-person office, I clearly saw the writing on the wall. You don't send that type of firepower if something great is happening. The day of the meeting comes up, and they told us that due to the merger, they were shutting down our office. But we could go to any of the other offices they or the new company had. I wasn't 100% not going to move, but I wanted to know my options. To say they weren't prepared for this meeting is an understatement. I asked them several questions that were critical to me making a decision on my future within the next 5 days. 1. Will you pay my moving expenses? 2. Will you pay to break my lease? This was March and I renewed my lease in February. 3. Will you pay cost of living adjustments if the average costs are higher where I go? The answer to all 3 was initially, "We don't know, we'll have to get back to you." This was on a Friday, and they told me by the end of that day I would have my answers. Shockingly enough, come Monday, I did not have these answers. I told this to my local manager, and he cussed under his breath and hopped on the phone. About 30 minutes later, I get my answers. 1, no. 2, no. 3, no. While I had expected these answers, I could tell they did not expect my next question. By the merger, I had just gone over 3 years with the company. I asked them what the severance package looked like. One more time I was told, "We don't know, we'll have to get back to you." A couple hours later, they offered me 1 month's salary, not factoring in my commissions, which had exceeded my salary. Not only did they offer me scraps, they wanted me to sign a new non-compete with all sorts of new teeth. Needless to say, I told them no thanks to all of it. This made them mad, and then they told me that I could turn in my stuff and would be paid for the next 2 weeks. What they didn't know or ask is what I was working on. In the business, it's typically very easy to pick up the ball for someone else. Unknown to them, I was working on an incredibly complicated project moving a portable air traffic control tower from Jacksonville to Puerto Rico. This is also a government project since it's involving airports. So all the T's need to be crossed along with all the I's dotted. To get this down to Puerto Rico, we put it on a barge. This thing was basically a massive camper converted with a pop-up tower and all sorts of electronics if you're trying to imagine it. Oversized and needing permits to move. I honestly can't tell you what happened from this point. I never found out. All I can do is sit around from time to time and chuckle about how whoever tried to pick up my slack stepped into a hornet's nest the likes of which I couldn't have set up had I planned and tried. They let me go on the spot since they didn't want me harvesting info to poach customers and start my own gig. What they didn't know is that I knew all of this was coming and had already printed out everything I needed several days before. Had they asked me to see this thing through, I probably would have. When it's very specialized hands-on work like what OP was doing, I hate the whole non-compete thing. They're letting you go unless you move to an entirely different state and then also trying to tell you that you can't either work in that field or start your own company in that field. You're telling me because I don't want to blow a whole bunch of money trying to move to an entirely different state just for your company, you're trying to make sure I can't even work in this field? It sucks that you have to miss out on that month's payment or whatever, but OP did the right thing. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So if you have a favorite story of the day, let me know which story and why in the comments down below. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, and if you haven't, subscribe and turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. No matter what you do, whether it's just viewing the video, liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, I appreciate the heck out of it. Every little thing that you do helps the channel grow that much more, and I can't thank you enough for it. So, until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll be right here next time on the Storytime channel.